And we have Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiling his cabinet on Tuesday, one he says reflects the focus of his new government to move Canada forward.
This cabinet is smaller and more focused than those of previous governments. It will operate with a commitment to true cabinet government, with everyone expected and empowered to show leadership, to bring new ideas, to have a clear focus, and to take decisive actions to accomplish their work. In a return to more traditional cabinet government, our cabinet will be supported by 10 secretaries of state who will lead on key priorities within their ministers' portfolios. We will govern as a cabinet constructively and collaboratively, working with caucus and across parties in Parliament to deliver the change that Canadians want and desire. Our new government will be a strong and reliable partner to the provinces, the territories, and to Indigenous peoples. We will reinforce bridges across labor, business, and civil society. And together, we will advance the nation-building investments that will support the core mission of this government, which is to create the strongest economy in the G7, an economy that works for everyone. We need to balance experience and new perspectives. Canadians voted for big change, not small change. They voted for big change. We're blessed with the trust of many Canadians. We have a big intake of new deputies, lots of different experiences that they're bringing, and so bringing a balance, which is what we have of experience, perhaps in some cases in new roles, but experience as cabinet ministers, and new voices, new perspectives. Half and half. For me, it's perfect.
Now, there are 28 ministers plus Carney, along with 10 secretaries of state to support specific policy areas. The cabinet maintains near gender parity with 13 men and 11 women, excluding Carney. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was quick to point out the number of ministers who served in roles with former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
The Conservatives will take our role of holding the government accountable seriously. That doesn't mean we reflexively oppose everything the government does. When it comes, for example, to foreign affairs, if the government does a good job at defending our national interests in negotiations with the U.S., then we will support those efforts. When they're right, we'll stand with them. When they're wrong, we will oppose them. In his first press conference, Mr. Carney talked a good game about reversing Liberal policies in these areas, but now we have to find out if he was serious. And so far, it's not a promising start. The first disappointment is, unfortunately, his cabinet. He appointed Trudeau's old team and Trudeau's old advisors. Stephen Guilbeault, whose radical green agenda would shut down all future developments in our resource industry, is still the minister responsible for Quebec. Sean Fraser was the immigration minister who caused the immigration crisis, the housing minister who gave us the housing crisis, and now he's the minister responsible for addressing the Liberal crime crisis. It seems like he is the master at failing upward. Chrystia Freeland, who as finance minister hiked capital gains tax and carbon taxes and massively grew our debt to the point where we now spend $1 billion a week on interest, stays in the cabinet. Then there's Gary Anadasangari, the new Minister of Public Safety, who said the actual crimes, the actual issues around bail are quite sound, and they are embedded in, codified in law right now, as in to say that there's nothing wrong with the system. Well, in fact, there's everything wrong, as we see from the growing crime wave on our streets. Then there's François-Philippe Champagne, Trudeau's Minister of Everything, who never really managed to do anything. And he did it very loudly. But nice guy. I'll give him credit. He's a nice guy. But he was the Minister of Industry, during which we had the worst economic growth of any country in the G7. And now he's in charge of the budget. Then there's Joly, LeBlanc, Haidu, Anand. Anand was the president of the Treasury Board, during which time the bureaucracy and the consultant bills blew out of control. In all, 14 Trudeau ministers are now in Carney's cabinet. It's more of the same when Canada needs real change.
And we have a question tonight for you. What is your take on Carney's cabinet picks? Bold new direction or more of the same? We want your comments. Post them on Facebook or YouTube. They'll come in to us. And we do have some comments coming in already, Eddie. And let's just bring a couple of those up right now. And the first one is from Deborah. Do you think Carney's new government is top heavy with elites? Well, I'll leave that up to everyone to make their own decision. I think it's balanced. Yes, you have lawyers and you have others, business people, and so on. And those are the people who are offering for office. So that's who he has to pick from. But I can understand where there are some people who would, feel that, they're kind of top heavy in the upper crust, if you will. Your thoughts on that one, Eddie?
Well, you know what? I think typically in any Canadian government, you're going to get a balance. I mean, you are going to have your elites and privileged. I don't think it's a majority. It's definitely a minority in terms of that kind of person that's running our country, both in Prime Minister and front bench and back bench. Then you get the middle of the grade, and then you get some people that are right from the grassroots that actually work their way up through politics and quite honestly earning their spot in any sort of an opposition or cabinet post. And in terms of what I've seen in Carney's cabinet, I think we have a real good mix. And you know what, Gary? Let's call a spade a spade as well. If you look at the groups that are going to be forming the official opposition, it's not a bad balance, to tell you the truth. There's a balance of the elites, then there's a balance of the middle and the people at the bottom that made their way up. A lot of highly educated people. You can't hold that against them in terms of qualifying them as an elite or not. And you have a lot of individuals that have had corporate experience and a lot of individuals that actually have political background and have been in it for quite a while. So I think that Deborah's right. There's a tendency to look at our governments as elites, and I think a lot of that has to do with us being, how should I put it, blindwashed on the media and what we're seeing in the United States, where the entire government is run by elitists. So I don't think that's the case in Canada. I think we're far from it. That's more of an American thing. And I'm seeing a pretty nice balance in Carney's cabinet, but also across the floor in the opposition side. I think minority government right now with Liberal is going to create some very, very colorful discussions on the floor as Parliament resumes. So. I think she's right to bring that out, Deborah. But by the same token, I think we have a nice balance, in my opinion.
And Monel, talking about Poilievre, he lost his bloody riding. I wish he would just slither away. And then, as far as the cabinet is concerned, time will tell what they make happen. So let's have a quick look at the cabinet. As far as some of the returning key appointments are concerned, of course, François-Philippe Champagne as Minister of Finance, and he was served for the 10 days or so of Carney's first government after winning the leadership as Minister of Finance. Anita Anand, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Dominique LeBlanc, Minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, intergovernmental affairs, and one Canadian economy. And, that's a term that Carney has been using almost from day one of the campaign. Instead of 13 economies in the country, one Canadian economy. And Dominique LeBlanc has been Intergovernmental Affairs Minister. He's been Minister of Everything and Minister of Cleanup when it came to cleaning up behind Trudeau's messes. So if anybody can make it work, it's LeBlanc. Of course, he has I don't know if I'd call it a good working relationship, but he has a working relationship with Trump's Treasury Secretary. Yeah. Who is the more he opens his mouth, the more of a goof he really shows himself as being. Then we have Chrystia Freeland as Minister of Transport and Internal Trade, and that, of course, is working on the bringing down the interprovincial trade barriers. Melanie Joly, Minister of Industry, with a focus also on the Quebec region. And, you and I talked about it briefly the other night as far as Joly is concerned. She did, I thought, over the last 5 or 6 years that she's been in foreign affairs, I thought, especially in the last couple of years, she was really coming into her own and really hitting her stride. And I thought she represented our country in a very, very professional, top-notch manner.
You're looking at mainstream media in the United States. I mean, she was not afraid to join any network and have dialogue and debate on what we as Canadians feel, what she's going to be doing to defend our national integrity, and without actually coming out and saying it, some very choice words about the American administration. So absolutely, Gary, I just love the way she handled herself in front of American media, how she handled herself in front of Canadians, which is most important. And she's got a wealth of experience that she can draw from to take this particular mandate forward and making it a success. She's been a success so far in my eyes, I think in your eyes as well, Gary, and I think she'll do quite well over the next 4 years.
Well, I think she will, and I don't know if Carney just felt that she needed a change, or maybe she asked for a change. Maybe she felt she was at a point where she was going to hit the wall, the burnout level. So, he brings her in, and I'm thinking, I was just sitting here thinking, as I was looking at her name and thinking, listening to what you were saying, he appointed, and this is, I'm going to be perfectly honest here. Carney Starr lost a point with me when he brought Stephen Guilbeault back into the cabinet. That guy should be sitting up in the nosebleed section of the back benches in the House of Commons and not anywhere near a ministerial post. No way at all. Not at all. So Carney lost a star, or has a dent in a star from my perspective, for bringing that guy in and putting him in charge of Canadian culture and the French language. And if he does anything there, like he did as Minister of Environment, where he filled, and he filled Trudeau over the last 10 years with all kinds of, huggy, feel good, green ideas. And where did it get us? We made all of Trudeau would run around making all of these pronouncements on the international stage, Guilbeault hanging from his side, or Guilbeault was let loose on his own on a number of occasions. And we never, ever even remotely came close to meeting any of those commitments. And, getting up on stage and frowning on other countries who weren't meeting the commitments or had no, program in place at the time. Who are you to throw stones living in a glass house, you two yahoos? So, like Guilbeault,
he didn't do any good. He didn't do any good for us in terms of the relationship of the federal government with Western Canada. I think a lot of his stock actually further alienated the West, especially Alberta, in terms of what he was speaking about from an environmental perspective and what he was filling up Trudeau's head with in terms of some horrible advice and policy. So, yeah, I wasn't aware that was him. I forgot what his name was, so now that it rings a bell. Yeah, I think that's a loss of a brownie point for Mr. Carney. Now, with any sort of assignment of a new cabinet, you're always prone to losing quite a few brownie points right at the get-go. From what I'm seeing right now, just one brownie point, and we'll just see how things work out. And you know what? It's going to show very quickly. It's not going to be
It already has.
It's going to show very quickly. Yeah. It has.
It already has. He walked out of the first cabinet meeting yesterday and started yakking about pipelines, and what he was saying went against the overall tone that Carney has been taking from day one, all through the campaign and after winning the election. And there's Guilbeault, who is supposedly now a seasoned politician who was in a cabinet post for a number of years under Trudeau, and he walks out and he opens up and starts singing off a different page in the hymn book. Like, if I had been Carney and I heard about that, he would have been in my office 5 minutes later, and you know what? Put your letter of resignation on the desk.
You know what? I would think that Carney brought him into his office and had a stern conversation with him. I don't know if he'd go outright and ask for his resignation, because what would that look like out to the rest of us Canadians and his critics alike? So, but I wouldn't put it past him that he grabbed him aside and said, "Listen, bozo, what the hell are you doing? We're supposed to be rowing in the same direction, and you've only had your job for what, a day?
Yeah.
A couple of days, and you're already screwing it up." I'm almost certain he would have had that discussion, because somebody of Carney's stature in terms of the corporate world and business world, those are discussions you have immediately. Don't let things fester for days. So fingers crossed that I'm right. I think I am. And next time he crosses that line, Gary, you're absolutely right. Kick in the ass, give me a resignation, let's move on. Right.
But Eddie, Carney knew what this guy was like before putting him into cabinet. And he should never have ended up with a role in cabinet. I would have taken one of the newbie Liberal MPs and found a cabinet spot or a Secretary of State to, bolster the numbers that he wanted representing Quebec, and go that route, than bringing that bird back in. And, if he had called Guilbeault in and said to him yesterday, "Put your resignation on my desk," this is what you would have heard from my place 4 floors down.
Yeah.
That's how much I think that is just a total, show.
Mm-hmm. I guess hindsight thinking, I can see where you're coming from. Maybe that would have shown a sign of strength that, you're right, just hindsight thinking to what you said. One of the struggles Carney's going to continue to have, and you saw what Poilievre seemed to have brought up consistently in his over his microphone and his sneering, always kind of relating back to the Trudeau era, right? And we've talked about this before. Carney will continue to struggle and will continue to fight that battle in separating himself from the Trudeau era. We saw during the campaign, we saw during the race for the Liberal leadership, that was a constant issue, separating himself from Trudeau. Maybe you're right. Maybe by taking action right away, getting rid of Guilbeault, getting on the microphone and saying, "He's gone. This is a mistake that I made, and we're going to be very quick in admitting our mistakes, fixing them, and moving forward."
Hang on.
Maybe that would have won him some brownie points and would push the opposition at bay a little bit. And that would help separate him from the Trudeau era, right?
Exactly. And then you have Gregor Robertson, who former mayor of Vancouver, so he's no newbie to the political scene as Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. And when he came out from the meeting yesterday and hit the wall of scrum, he also, his response about housing prices in the country was kind of offline from what, the official stance of Carney and his platform has been. And again, this is a guy who should have had enough common sense one day on the job. He hasn't even had a chance to look at any of the files or be briefed by the deputy minister or any of the other officials under the deputy minister. Hasn't had that opportunity. And he comes out shooting his mouth off instead of just saying, housing is a priority. I think the Prime Minister communicated that quite clearly throughout the campaign, and I'm ready to roll my sleeves up and get busy and carry through the commitments that we as a party have made to the people of Canada, and walk away.
But no, that stuff happened.
No, exactly. And again, there's a guy who should have, he's not a newbie. Yes, it's his first shot at the national forum, but still, it's very easy to make that transfer. And he's probably had more than his share of media training as to how to take the question and bridge to your message, your key message, main talking point, whatever you want to call it, and then move on. Get out.
Well, you know what? In my opinion, his microphone spot was a 50-50 deal. The 50-50 underwater was when he opened his mouth and commented on the cost of housing, that it doesn't necessarily have to come down. It's not word for word, but that was pretty much the idea. So that was a 50% underwater. And then he kind of got out of the water, where it was 50% above the water, basically saying the solution to all this is we are going to build. We're going to build homes. The solution here is building affordable housing, which has been a cornerstone, or a big corner piece of the Carney campaign for elections. So I look at what he had to say as a 50-50, and you're absolutely right. As a seasoned politician, especially in coming as mayor out of Vancouver, he should have known better. I don't know what happened there, if he had a brain freeze of sorts, but that was not the kind of statement to make. At the first time you're being exposed as part of your new portfolio, coming out and saying that housing costs don't have to come down, or whatever the case is. So bad one. And it's not a rookie mistake either. That's the whole. That's the whole thing. It's not a rookie mistake.
Yeah, exactly. And one other name that popped off the list for me, and I'd forgotten he actually had won his seat. And that was Evan Solomon, who is Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation. And I think that Carney is smart in focusing on that and having a minister focus on that aspect. And Evan Solomon, he's, I think...
Wasn't he broadcasting like that?
Yeah, he was in broadcasting journalist. He hosted actually Power and Politics on CBC, and then ended up hosting Power Play on CTV before leaving for New York. And he was hired on by a firm, or anyway, ended up with a firm in New York. And he also launched, I believe it was some kind of a digital newsletter while he was there. Mm-hmm. And then it was either just after the election in the U.S. or just after Christmas, he started popping up on like Power Play on CTV as a pundit. And along he went. And then apparently Carney picked the phone up and called him and asked him if he'd come back to Toronto and run in one of the Toronto ridings. And I just don't recall which riding it was, but he won it. And he's in cabinet. And certainly, if anybody can communicate what they're doing and what they're working on, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence and digital innovation, it'll be Evan Solomon. will be able to carry that message forward. And I think as a minister, I think he really will represent the country well. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of this whole thing with the artificial intelligence and the innovation side of things as well, because we have some very, very super intelligent people working in those fields in this country, right across the country from coast to coast to coast. And I think it's an untapped resource that we can really turn into a real solid pillar of our new one Canadian economy.
I'd love to see an Avro 2 be created by our Canadian engineers.
Yes.
And I think it's very easily feasible, granted that the money and the funding is made available, that we can do something like that. And you know what? We can start exporting some of our technology. I mean, look at the Avro Aero. I mean, this was far, far, far beyond anything any other country had. It just never. I mean, it got off the table. It got into the air. It was just kibosh for reasons unknown, which we'll never know. We can always look at creating that as a number 2. Look, in terms of aerospace, Canada has always been up there. You look at some of our companies that are related to the aerospace industry. You look at the organizations that put satellites into space. You're looking at the Canadarm. You're looking at the creation of Bombardier. I mean, we are very, very good when it comes to that kind of an innovation. And you know what? It would behoove me to actually see us take a step forward in competing with some of these big organizations like Saab. You're looking at the European Union coming up, or the Europeans coming up with a Eurofighter, or Boeing, or McDonnell Douglas, or whatever the case is. I think we could, be really, really good to see something like that come from our country, because you're right, Gary. We have the experience and the expertise to do it. Just need the money to do it. And what do you think about the appointment of David McGuinty as Minister of Defense?
He came from public safety, I think, wasn't it?
Yes,
originally. Yeah. So I think he was doing a solid job in public safety, and some of what he was involved with as far as public safety is concerned can relate very quickly and very easily to the defense side of things. And he is really a fresh face coming at that particular portfolio, and it's that's one of the important portfolios, because Carney has committed to spending money on our military and on our sovereignty, defending our sovereignty. So it's obvious that he has a lot of faith in McGuinty to produce. And I think that, if you watch him, he's kind of a very quiet individual, just sort of seems to take things in. But when he speaks, he seems to speak from authority and background. So obviously he's doing his job in staying on top of his files. And I think that that's a step forward as far as moving our military forward as well. And we have to really start stepping it up like yesterday.
And you know what? I mean, interestingly enough, if I'm looking at some of the appointments, or most of the appointment that Prime Minister Carney made, everyone that he's actually appointed in positions, except for maybe one that I see, actually has a background or a combination of backgrounds that will actually pay dividends towards the mandate that they've been given as ministers. I mean, that's essentially what you want to do. Put the right people in place to give you the best opportunity of success right from the get-go. David McGuinty is a classic example, as you brought up. I mean, he was Minister of Public Safety. I dug in a little bit more on his background. I don't know if you knew, Gary, but he was the chair of the National Security and Intelligence Committee, which actually oversaw Canadian intelligence services like CSIS. So, you combine public safety. You combine his public safety, you combine his experience and expertise in national security. You know what? That is a considerable background to bring into a portfolio as a Minister of Defense. So, that's another genius pick by Prime Minister Carney. I really, really like that one.
Yeah, and I'd forgotten about that actually, Eddie. Yeah. And just as a reminder, as we're getting ready to wrap up this portion, we want to ask you, what is your take on Carney's cabinet picks? Bold new direction or more of the same? Let us know in the comments, and we will bring them up for everyone to see and have a discussion around them. Eddie, so how would you rate it? A bold new direction or more of the same? Or did he strike a balance going down the center?
I think in terms of experience and expertise around the entire table when his cabinet and his ministers sit down, I think, I'll give him a 7 to 8 out of 10 in terms of the wealth of experience he has around this table. And the beauty of this, if for whatever reason, cabinet shuffles are not an uncommon thing. If he has to move people around within his cabinet to take on different portfolios, he can certainly do that with what he has. So, he's got his prime team, and he's also got backup in mind as well, because, especially in the portfolios when we have to deal with the United States, international relations, developing the economy and finding alternatives to the United States. He's got quite a few people in there with that kind of a background that they can all collaborate, if you want to put it. So I'd give him a 7, 8 out of 10 in terms of his overall picks. So I wouldn't say it's a balance down the line. But there is a balance down the line in terms of the individuals that he has brought in from all walks of life, which is great to see. So I would give him a passing grade on that. It's very difficult to say a stellar passing grade because this is his first kick at the can at politics. And I think we'll have to wait and see how his picks are working for him, and very, very quickly. I'd give it 3 to 6 months before, the daggers from the opposition start coming out and offer their critique, which is what they're being paid to do. But by the same token, we're going to see whether or not his picks are actually going to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Right out of the gate, there were 2 faux pas that we saw right off the bat. We'll see how that pans out. Out of the entire pick, and I think I brought this up recently to you, while we were looking at the Liberal convention and campaign for leadership, right? We had said any one of these would be a great pick for a Liberal leader and Prime Minister of Canada, right? Now imagine one wins, let's say in this particular case, Carney, and he brings on the people that were competing with him for the Liberal leadership. We're talking about the Carina Gould, we're talking about the Chrysler Freeland, Frank Baylis. They were all there. Can you imagine bringing all these individuals into the fold and being part of his cabinet? And I think he brought 2 of them in. My question for you, Gary, is I know that Carina Gould ran for election. She won I think it was Burlington, the Hamilton area, Burlington, Ontario. She won it quite handily. I'm surprised he didn't give her at least a backbench position in terms of the 10 ministers that he picked as secretaries. She wasn't offered any sort of portfolio, and I'm kind of surprised by that. And by the same token, equally, I'm disappointed by that. And I don't know if I'm missing something in the story as to why she wasn't picked there. And maybe you might be able to elaborate on that. But I would have loved to have seen her with at least a portfolio. You and I both said she's going to be the Prime Minister of Canada one day.
Yeah, I think, and I seems to me I heard some discussion about this, that a lot of her policy planks that she was bringing out, I think may have been drifting too far left for Carney's liking, or at least that's what some of the discussion centered on. And therefore, he probably felt best just to leave that alone for the time being. Or maybe he sees her potential and is keeping her on the bench at the moment, but she is probably one of a number, including some of the secretaries of state on the bench, but who will be called up if there are some changes that are needed at some point down the road, whether it's a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 6 months from now. You know, he does have bench strength to fall back on, which sometimes, you know, you have some governments and they really don't have the bench strength of the right type of people to handle it. Because, I mean, she did handle, like, she was government House leader. She handled that and tangled with Poilievre on a regular basis and held her ground, no problem. So I'm not sure. I mean, that, you know, the whole thing about some of her policies may be too far for Carney. That may be just some of the you know, the happy hour gossip in Ottawa. I'm not 100% sure, but you know, I think of it as he's making sure that he has the bench strength to call up, unlike certain NHL teams, it seems. So anyhow, I think that's where it's going, Eddie.
Yeah, it makes sense, actually, come to think of it.
The other thing is, my thoughts on the whole cabinet, well, the first one was what I kind of blew steam off about a while ago at the beginning of the show. But I think he needed to bring in the Melanie Jolys, especially the Dominique LeBlancs, and Anita Anand, you know, that core group. I think especially they've been involved in carrying the ball after Trudeau announced his resignation. They've been involved in carrying the ball with the U.S. through some really tough times up till, you know, today, or, well, Tuesday when the new cabinet was unveiled. And they're still going to be carrying, you know, some of them are still going to be carrying the ball throughout. So you don't throw that experience out the door just because you want to have a full new face. And, you know, you have to look at the new faces coming in because you know some of them need some time. It's the first time they've probably even set foot in the House of Commons, let alone on Parliament Hill.
Right.
So they have to have time to come into their own and develop. And you just can't put them into a cabinet post right away. And some of the people coming in who are new have business backgrounds and have had contact with municipal, provincial, and federal levels of government in their positions in the private sector. So that experience leads. So unlike Pierre Poilievre's take on it, I think it's a good balance, aside from one. And I think he did a good job, and I think he does have some bench strength. It's going to be interesting. The way he's running it is, he's basically, I think, saying to the ministers, you know, you're the VPs, handle it. Do your job. You know, we'll meet from time to time, and we'll look at you know, the performance indicators and see how you're doing, and you know where we can go. From there, I think too, at least 3 or 4, maybe more than half of the 10 secretaries of state are also, you know, he's using those positions to see what these people will do and groom and look for some potential full cabinet material from there as well. And one of them, Wayne Long, who's Secretary of State for the Canada Revenue Agency and financial institutions. Wayne, 10 years as an MP in the St. John area, wasn't going to reoffer, especially with Trudeau still at the helm. He said, okay, I've had enough. And then Carney comes along, calls him, and he said, okay, if you win the leadership, I'm in. And he was in, and he won the riding again handily. But Wayne Long has been one of the best performing MPs for the St. John at Rothsay at the time, now St. John Kennebecasis riding, that he's been one of the best performing in the last 5 to 6, maybe even 7 MPs that I remember and covered over my years in covering the St. John area, the New Brunswick area. And the amount of money that he has brought into that riding is just phenomenal. Even when he had his hands slapped for voting against a tax bill a few years ago that was going to impact small businesses. And he said, I'm voting against it. My constituents in the small business community are telling me it's going to hurt them. And it's going to have, it's going to be tough on them, period. And he voted again. And I think he got hauled into the Prime Minister's office and probably had a discussion, a meaningful exchange of dialogue. And then he was removed from his committee work. And he was left off committees for a while. This was his punishment. But he very quickly learned how to work the system, and he just kept working the system even while he was not in the good graces of the Prime Minister. And he never, I think, ever returned to the good graces of the Prime Minister. And, right. The first one to speak out back in June that Trudeau had to go. And just kept on speaking from there, right to the point, I think, at one point he referred to Trudeau as delusional.
Yeah.
So, and he has a business background, and he has worked for companies where he traveled around the world. So he has that background, and he'll take that particular assignment, and he's going to be one of the performers coming out of the Secretary of State. I'll put money on it for sure. Well, so I think overall, Carney did a good job. I think he's giving them some latitude to do the job. Some of them need some media training ASAP, and some of them need to be retrained from a media perspective, especially for the Ottawa press gallery. So,
Look, you know what? I mean, Prime Minister Carney, overall, since he took the reins as Prime Minister of Canada, de facto and after election, I'm pretty impressed with what he's been able to do with the pressures imposed on us by the United States, the threats imposed on us by the United States, and pressures within Canada to actually get us through the post-Trudeau era and evolve us both as from an economy perspective, in terms of taking care of the important stuff, as you mentioned often, health, getting rid of the trade barriers, interprovincial trade barriers. I mean, this is all what he had preached during his election campaign. Thus far, in terms of how he's been representing at least myself as a citizen of Canada, I'm quite pleased. And you know what? Opposition is going to be opposition. Poilievre is going to be Poilievre. Already firing salvos at him, and he hasn't even started doing his job yet, as he's just appointed his cabinet. Let's see let him do his job. Let him run the country, and we'll deal with the rest as time goes on. So, as a voter, I'm quite pleased with how he's performed thus far, and time will tell.